You just got your paycheck. Before you even open your banking app, a third of it is already gone to taxes. Meanwhile, there are people worth hundreds of millions of dollars who report $0 in salary and somehow live in mansions, fly private, and buy companies. They're not hiding money offshore. They're not breaking any laws. They're just getting paid differently. My name is Adam, and after studying how high-net-worth investors actually structure their compensation, I realized something most people never figure out. Salary is the most expensive way to get paid, and the wealthy stopped using it decades ago. If you're working hard, paying taxes on every dollar before you even see it, and wondering why building wealth feels impossible, hit subscribe because what I'm about to show you is completely legal and hiding in plain sight. Here's what's actually happening. Elon Musk takes $0 in salary from Tesla. Mark Zuckerberg takes $1 a year from Meta. Larry Page and Sergey Brin? $1 from Google. This isn't some quirky billionaire club tradition. This is tax strategy, and it's been happening for decades. When you take a salary, you pay income tax immediately. 30, 40, sometimes 50% depending on where you live. That's more than half your money gone before you touch it. But when you get paid in company stock instead of cash, in most cases nothing gets taxed until you sell. Your net worth goes up 10 million, 100 million, a billion, and you owe zero in taxes as long as you don't sell. So how do they actually spend money if they're not taking a salary? They borrow against it. Instead of selling stock and paying capital gains tax, they walk into a bank and say, "I own 50 million in shares. Loan me 5 million. The bank gives them the money at 2 or 3% interest. And here's the key, loans aren't income. You don't pay taxes on borrowed money. They just got 5 million in cash and paid zero in taxes. You're over here losing 30% of your paycheck before you touch it, and they're accessing millions completely tax-free. And it gets better for them. A few years go by. That 50 million in stock is now worth 80 million because the company kept growing. They take out a new $10 million loan, pay off the old 5 million, and pocket another 5 million in cash. Still no taxes. This goes on for decades. Borrow, refinance, borrow again. Their wealth compounds in the background while they live off loans. When they die, their heirs inherit everything at a stepped-up basis. The IRS resets the value of the assets to whatever they're worth on the day of death. All those gains vanish for tax purposes. Their kids sell everything the next day and owe nothing. It's called buy, borrow, die. Let me show you what this looks like in real numbers. You make 100,000 in salary, you pay 30,000 in taxes, you take home 70. A billionaire borrows 2 million against their stock at 3% interest. That's 60,000 a year in interest. No income tax. No payroll tax. They access $2 million for the cost of 60,000 while you paid 30,000 just to keep 70. Now here's where this gets even more interesting. That's 60,000 in interest they're paying. In many cases, they can deduct it. So they're not just avoiding income tax on the 2 million, they're actually reducing their taxable income by another 60,000. Meanwhile, you can't deduct a single dollar of the taxes that got taken from your paycheck. Once you understand how the tax code really works, you realize it's not designed to tax wealth. It's designed to tax labor. Work for money, get taxed hard and immediately. Let money work for you, defer taxes indefinitely, and pay less when you finally do. The tax code was literally written by people who own assets. The average net worth of a U.S. senator is over $3 million. Over 40% of Congress members are millionaires. They understand that if they make the tax code friendly to asset owners, they're making it friendly to themselves. This isn't some conspiracy. It's just incentive alignment. Jeff Bezos, when he was CEO of Amazon, took a salary of around $80,000 a year. Less than a lot of mid-level managers at the company he was running. But his net worth was increasing by billions every year because he owned about 11% of Amazon at the time. In 2007, Bezos actually reported so little in taxable income that he qualified for and claimed a $4,000 child tax credit. A man worth billions, getting a tax credit designed for middle-class families. That's not fraud. That's just understanding that income and wealth are two completely different things, and only one of them gets taxed aggressively. ProPublica did this massive investigation where they got access to IRS data on the wealthiest Americans. Between 2014 and 2018, the 25 richest Americans saw their wealth grow by $401 billion. And they paid $13 billion in federal income taxes. That works out to an effective tax rate of 3.4%. Meanwhile, a median American household making $70,000 pays about 14% in federal taxes. You're making 70 grand and paying 14%. They're making billions and paying 3.5%. That's not a mistake. That's the system working exactly as designed. Their wealth is in assets. Stocks, real estate, businesses, whatever. And as long as it stays in asset form, it barely gets taxed. It's only when you convert it to cash that the tax bill shows up. So the game becomes, how do I access the economic value of my assets without ever triggering a taxable event? That's where the borrowing comes in. If you've got $10 million in appreciating assets, you don't sell them to fund your lifestyle. You borrow against them. The interest rate is lower than the growth rate of the assets, so you're actually getting wealthier while spending borrowed money. Let's say you own a business worth $20 million. You could take $2 million as salary, pay taxes on it, and end up with maybe $1.2 million after taxes. Or you could leave that money in the business and borrow $2 million against your equity. You go to a bank, they loan you $2 million at 4% interest. That's $80,000 a year in interest payments. You live off that $2 million. No income tax. No capital gains tax. Just $80,000 in interest, which might even be deductible. Meanwhile, the money left in the business is reinvesting, growing, potentially turning that $20 million company into a $30 million company. So you got to spend $2 million, you paid $80,000 in interest instead of $800,000 in taxes, and your business got more valuable. That's the game. Now, before you think you can just copy this strategy tomorrow, here's what nobody on YouTube will tell you. This can destroy you if you try it too early. Let's say you've got $100,000 in stock and you borrow $50,000 against it. Then the market crashes 40%. Your stock is now worth $60,000, but you owe $50,000. The bank sends a margin call. They want their money back immediately. You don't have it. So they force you to sell your stock at the absolute worst time at the bottom of the crash, and you still owe them money after the forced sale. You just lost everything trying to play a game you weren't capitalized for. In 2022, when the market dropped, there were stories everywhere about people who'd borrowed against their portfolios getting completely wiped out. People with six-figure portfolios who thought they were being sophisticated by using margin loans. The market dropped 20–25%, and suddenly they were getting margin calls they couldn't meet. Forced liquidations, absolute disasters. The difference between a strategy and a disaster is the size of your cushion. When you have $500 million and the market drops 50%, you still have $250 million. You're fine. When you have 100,000 and you're over-leveraged, a 20% drop ends you. Billionaires get loans at 2 or 3% because banks know they're good for it. But you walk in with a $100,000 portfolio asking for a loan, and they either say no or they charge you 8–9%. At those rates, you're not beating the market. You're bleeding money. This isn't a strategy you grow into. It's one you earn your way into. But the way you get rich enough to use these strategies is by understanding the principles behind them and applying them at your level right now. The tax code recognizes different types of income, and it treats them completely differently. Ordinary income gets taxed at your marginal rate. For most people, that's somewhere between 22 and 37% federal plus state taxes. Then there's capital gains. If you hold an asset for more than a year, it's a long-term capital gain, and that gets taxed at 0, 15, or 20% depending on your income level. Let that sink in. The same $40,000 gain, if it came from salary, you keep about $27,000 after taxes. If it came from an investment you held for over a year, you keep $34,000. That's $7,000 extra, just because of how it was classified by the IRS. Now multiply that difference across an entire career. If you make $3 million over 40 years through salary, you'll pay somewhere around $900,000 in federal taxes. If you make $3 million through long-term investments, you'll pay maybe $450,000 in federal taxes. That's $450,000 in difference. Same amount of money, just structured differently. The wealthy deliberately structured their entire financial lives around maximizing capital gains and minimizing ordinary income. That's why they take low salaries. That's why they get paid in stock. That's why they hold assets instead of selling them. Let's say you're a software engineer making $150,000 a year at a big tech company. You're paying $61,000 in taxes on a $150,000 salary. You take home $89,000. Now let's say you take that exact same skill set and you start a software consulting company. You pay yourself a salary of $70,000, which is reasonable compensation. The business makes another $80,000 in profit. Instead of taking that as additional salary, you take it as distributions from your S-corp. That $80,000 gets taxed as capital gains, not ordinary income. You just saved about $12,000 in payroll taxes alone. Then you've got business deductions. Your home office, your computer, your phone, your internet, software subscriptions. Let's say that's another $10,000 in deductions. You've now saved over $20,000 in taxes compared to the same economic outcome as an employee. This is how people go from making $150,000 a year to building multimillion-dollar net worths in 10 or 15 years. It's not that they're making more money. They're just keeping way more of what they make because they understand how to structure it. When you do the S-corp thing, you cannot just pay yourself $10,000 in salary and take $200,000 in distributions. The IRS will absolutely come after you for that. You have to pay yourself what they call reasonable compensation for the work you're doing. This only works if you pay yourself a reasonable salary first. Otherwise, the IRS will destroy you. If you're a consultant and consultants in your field typically make $80,000 a year, you need to pay yourself something in that range. Let's say you pay yourself $70,000 in salary and you take $50,000 in distributions. On that $50,000, you're saving about $7,000 a year in payroll taxes. Over 10 years, that's $70,000 you kept instead of sending to the government. And that $70,000 can now compound in investments for the next 30 years. Every dollar you make from a paycheck gets taxed at ordinary income rates. But every dollar you make from investments held over a year gets taxed at long-term capital gains rates. 0, 15, or 20%. If you're making $80,000 a year right now, all from salary, you're probably paying about $15,000 in federal taxes. But what if you could restructure your life so that $40,000 came from salary and $40,000 came from long-term capital gains? Your tax bill would drop to maybe $9,000. Same $80,000. $6,000 less in taxes. Every single year. Over 30 years, that's $180,000 in savings. Invested at 8%, that turns into $700,000. You just gave yourself a $700,000 retirement bonus by understanding how to structure income. This is why the wealthy obsess over ownership. Salary gets destroyed by taxes. Equity gets treated favorably. The system doesn't reward hard work. It rewards ownership and punishes anyone who never gets past a paycheck. A salary feels safe. It's predictable. But that feeling of safety is expensive. You're paying for that predictability with 30 or 40% of your income. Meanwhile, ownership gives you options. You decide when to sell. You decide when to take income. You can't wait out payroll taxes. They take it whether you want them to or not. Here's the concrete path forward. If 100% of your income is salary right now, your only job for the next 5 to 10 years is to shift that ratio. You need to get to a point where at least 20 to 30% of your income comes from something other than a W-2. Here's exactly how you do it. Step 1. Open a Roth IRA if you haven't already. Max it out every single year. That's $6,000 a year or $7,000 if you're over 50. Every dollar that grows in a Roth IRA is completely tax-free when you retire. Not tax-deferred like a 401k. Tax-free. Let's say you max out your Roth IRA for 30 years. $6,000 a year, that's $180,000 in total contributions. If that money grows at 8% annually, you'll have about $730,000 when you retire. And when you withdraw it, you pay zero in taxes. If you'd put that same money in a regular taxable brokerage account, you'd owe capital gains tax on the $550,000 in gains. At 15%, that's $82,000. The Roth IRA just saved you $82,000 for the exact same investment. Step 2. Start building equity outside your job. I don't care if it's a side business, freelance work, consulting, creating content, whatever. You need income that you control and that you can structure tax efficiently. Once you're making even $10,000 or $20,000 a year from something you own, set up an S-Corp or LLC and start paying yourself strategically. Let's say you start a side business doing web design. First year, you make $20,000. But year 2, you make $40,000. Now it's worth setting up an S-Corp. You pay yourself a salary of $25,000, which is reasonable for part-time web design work. The other $15,000 comes out as distributions. On that $15,000, you're saving about $2,000 in self-employment taxes. Over 20 years at 8% growth, that's $91,000. You just gave yourself a $91,000 bonus by structuring your income correctly. Step 3. Invest everything you're saving into assets that generate long-term capital gains. Index funds, dividend growth stocks, real estate, whatever you understand and can hold for the long term. The key is you're buying things that appreciate in value and you're not selling them every year. You're letting them compound and deferring the tax bill as long as possible. When you do eventually sell, you're paying 15 or 20% instead of 30 or 35. That spread over a lifetime is the difference between retiring comfortably and retiring wealthy. You're 28 years old. You've got a decent job, you're maxing your Roth IRA, and you started a side business that's making $30,000 a year. You're saving about $5,000 a year in taxes compared to if it was all W-2 income. You take that $5,000 every year and you invest it in index funds. You just let it compound for 30 years. At 8% annual growth, that $5,000 a year turns into $600,000. And because it's all long-term capital gains, when you sell it in retirement, you're paying maybe $90,000 in taxes instead of $200,000. You just created $600,000 in wealth from understanding tax strategy. You're not trying to borrow millions against stock in year 2. You're playing a 10, 20, 30-year game where you gradually shift from being someone who gets paid for labor to someone who gets paid from ownership. You don't need to wait decades to see benefits. If you're 25 right now and you start doing this, by 35 you could easily have $200,000 in assets generating favorable tax treatment. By 45, that could be $700,000 or $800,000. By 55, over $2 million. And you didn't need to make $500,000 a year to get there. You just needed to understand the rules. Now I know some of you are thinking, I'm starting from zero. I've got student loans. I've got credit card debt. If you're in pure survival mode, long-term tax optimization feels irrelevant. But here's the thing. The best time to start thinking about tax-efficient wealth building is when you can least afford to waste money on taxes. If you're only able to save $2,000 a year right now, you cannot afford to lose $600 or $700 of that to taxes you could have legally avoided. That $600 invested over 30 years turns into $12,000. So even if all you can do right now is put $50 a month into a Roth IRA, do it. Because you're not just building wealth, you're building tax-advantaged wealth, and that's how regular people actually get ahead. The $0 salary isn't a myth. It's the end result of understanding that the system rewards ownership and punishes paychecks. You can't skip to the end, but you can start moving in that direction right now. And the earlier you start, the more compounding works in your favor. Stop measuring success by your salary. Start measuring it by how much equity you're building, how much of your wealth is in tax-advantaged accounts, how much of your income comes from capital gains instead of wages. Because the people who win this game, the people who actually build generational wealth, they didn't out-earn everyone. They out-owned them. This isn't about gaming the system or finding shady loopholes. This is about understanding what the system actually rewards and aligning your financial life with that reality. The tax code is completely public. Everything I just explained is legal. Most people just never bother. The wealthy aren't smarter than you. They're not working harder than you. They just understood earlier that the game has different levels, and salary is the lowest level with the worst rules and the worst rewards. Everything I just explained, every strategy, every principle, it's available to you right now. You just have to decide you're done playing the game where you automatically lose 30% before you even start. If this fundamentally changed how you think about getting paid and building wealth, hit that like button and subscribe to adaminvests. I break down how money actually works, how the tax code actually works, and how regular people can use the same strategies the wealthy use. I put out videos like this every single week. And if you want to go even deeper, check out my video on how to legally pay zero in taxes. That's where we get into qualified opportunity zones, donor-advised funds, and some strategies that sound illegal but are completely built into the tax code. I'll see you there.